This is Danny Flexen here for SecondsOut. Delighted to be joined by Ron Lewis, top boxing journalist, currently for Boxing Scene, formerly of the Times, of course. Ron, how are you?
I'm very good, yeah.
Glad to hear it. Now, news broke early yesterday that something we've been told for a long time off the record, that the Anthony Joshua Oleksandr Usyk rematch has landed in the UK on Sky Sports, or Sky Sports box office, to be specific about it. I guess, first of all, why do we think it's taken so long to get here?
I think clearly there's, there have been issues over. I don't think it's been the normal sort of sense. I mean, in the part of the deal rumbled on for a long time to actually get the fight made. We didn't hear about a venue until a week or so ago. I mean, we always say it was going to be Saudi, then it was going to be Jeddah, and then it was suddenly announced the venue. The tickets only went on sale this week, and so clearly there's been some sort of operational sort of like difficulties with it. I mean, there was it was originally meant to be in July. I mean, it was originally meant to be much earlier, but then everyone said it was end of July. Then it was moved to August, and I think that's just part of it. I think the main thing was that they had to deal with sorting out the deal with the host, because that was such a large deal, and clearly it was the decision of the hosts, the Saudis, to actually where they wanted it to go. And part of that is how much money they're going to make back, but obviously part of that, the whole point of the fight being in Jeddah in the first place, is so they can promote Saudi Arabia. And there is a view. I mean, there's a view put around in boxing that they wanted to get as much publicity as they possibly could. And whatever you say about Sky, we all know they've got a great marketing team behind them. When they get Sky Sports News behind them, they really, really push a fight. And it's something that at the moment DAZN just can't match. They can't match the viewership base, and they can't really match the the klaxon that Sky Sports put behind it.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to get the most eyeballs possible. It kind of puts Sky maybe in a difficult situation, though, in that recently there's been some criticism, particularly from their golf team, about the tour that's going on in Saudi Arabia at the moment, and the kind of implications of sports washing and so on. But now they've taken an event for their box office channel that is based in Saudi Arabia and likely has the same ambitions.
To an extent, yeah, but I think one's, you got to think one's a commercial decision, and one's if you believe Sky Sports News is a journalistic operation, it is one thing, because largely it does promote its own stuff on its own channels, but there are definitely journalists that work for it, and they've got to go out and ask the questions that they need to ask. I mean, the same situation is with Newcastle. You're telling me they're not, when there's criticism of the golf, but at the same time, when it was greeted with raptures when Newcastle was taken over by essentially the Saudi government. And so look, there's a lot of let's not pretend that the Saudis are the only people doing sports washing in either boxing or let alone sport as a whole. And you also have a strange situation, don't you, that in golf, that the European tour or tours, they go to countries like that anyway to play tournaments, yet suddenly they're setting up their rival tournament, and then suddenly it's a different matter, then suddenly it's sports washing. And it's like, hang on, there have been a lot of sports that have gone to Saudi Arabia, motor racing, golf, boxing was obviously one, and there are, football's been there too. And you've got to realize it in the bigger picture, and it's not just down to Anthony Joshua, Oleksandr Usyk, and Eddie Hearn. There's a whole bigger picture there, and we all know how short a career boxing is. Do you really resent boxers wanting to get the most money they possibly can?
Is there an argument there, and it's often one we see from the promoters of events like this and the golf tour as well, that having these major events and having the eyes of the world on that region can actually promote change in the area.
To an extent, yeah, I think, you know, that's obviously kind of slightly laughed at that, but I only saw it once, which was to Riyadh for the first fight. So Saudi Arabia thinking, you know, it feels, Riyadh felt very much like, you know, those other sort of Middle Eastern states, Doha and not necessarily Dubai, but, you know, Abu Dhabi. There's a lot sort of like, you know, a similar vibe about it. Obviously, you know, they all have, you know, tough governments. Saudi obviously strongest of the lot, but I mean, one of the things I noticed on this is that Ramla Ali's boxing on the spot, and I think that's incredible, really. You would think that, I mean, I remember going back to, which Olympics was it when they had their first, you know, woman competitor,
2012.
Saudi Arabia, and I remember there was a judo, there was a judo fighter, and you know, that was treated as, wow, that's a real step forward. That's real stuff. So, you know, there's always that to or fro thing, isn't it? One of the problems with Saudi Arabia is obviously they're fighting a war with, you know, that's causing huge hardship in Yemen at the moment. That's should be swept under the carpet. But, you know, is it better to have a closed society in Saudi Arabia and they don't have any interaction with the world? Who knows? But, you know, the world has been dealing with Saudi Arabia, you know, since the Second World War. Since the Second World War, when they discovered oil, and, you know, bit of history, Roosevelt did a deal to guarantee the Saudi government security, you know, in return for oil. And since then, there's been an uneasy relationship with Saudi Arabia, with the West, and that's not going to end because of a fight. It's not going to. Will that move things on? I don't know. Does it just cover it up? Who knows? But you go to Saudi Arabia, you go around shopping malls, and you see, you know, every Western brand you could imagine, and you know, even though they don't drink there, you know, all the you know, all the beer brands have their own alcohol-free versions happily available everywhere. And so, you know, it's this fight isn't going to make a difference, I believe, one way or the other. But that doesn't mean that they should be stopped from taking place.
Now, going back to the commercial aspects, there's been a few people saying that Sky haven't given themselves enough time to promote this to become a pay-per-view success. They've obviously paid a hell of a lot of money for it. They're going to want to make that back and then some. Is there enough time to really drum up interest now with, what, 3 or 4 weeks to go?
Well, I mean, most of their, you know, for any of these events, you wouldn't expect to see a huge amount of stuff more than 3 or 4 weeks out. That's one thing. I mean, the thing you would say is that, you know, all the shows they normally do around it are normally made about 10 weeks in advance. It's normally around the town with an announcement, things like that. You know, the sort of like
gloves are off
and all those things. The, you know, behind the scenes camps things. It'll be interesting to see because of you know, because of course, one of the things is that Matchroom shows for DAZN, certainly in Britain, are actually produced by Matchroom. They're not actually produced by, in the main, not actually produced by DAZN. They're produced by Matchroom Media. And so whether this includes deals to present to, you know, the sort of documentaries they've presumably already been working on, I would imagine it does, because otherwise those are probably going to go unseen.
Complete
and
waste.
2, it'll be, you know, it's part of the deal. Part of the deal is they've got to have stuff to actually push it. It's everyone's interest to push it. It's not in Matchroom's interest to have you know, to reduce the viewership. And, you know, while there's been a kind of well publicized sort of like fallout between Eddie and the Sky hierarchy, you know, that's they're businessmen at the end of the day. It doesn't help them to actually you know, sort of spite each other or something like that. They, you know, Eddie's a fantastic promoter, and yeah, I'm sure he'll happily you push it as hard as they can. It's in their interest to. It's in their interest to. It's also in their interest to show they can produce a big fight here. So if then they there's talk of Saudi getting a Fury Joshua Usyk fight afterwards, and if that does, they're going to want a promoter to actually who can work with it and make the best job of it, not have a sort of like local difficulty getting in the way of that.
How do you think the Zone feel at the moment? Because they've signed AJ to this long-term exclusive in inverted commas contract, but it doesn't include this fight because the TV rights were sold to the Saudis. Now, if Joshua loses to Usyk, his career won't be over. He'll always be a commercial attraction, but his value is diminished somewhat, and then he's a DAZN fighter for big money.
Yeah, I don't know. It obviously appeared odd, and they obviously had hopes that they were going to, sign the deal and agree the deal, and they'd obviously had some sort of talks, and but they've got, I suppose, a long-term view of it. They're looking at this. They're branching out into Australia right now in the next couple of months. They're looking at Japan. They're looking at a sort of this global picture, and if they're pushing on down that path, they've got to have fighters on there who are going to appeal in different countries. Obviously, it's hugely in their interest that Joshua wins, but it's a gamble, isn't it? It's a gamble. You'd have thought there's something built in the contract. All boxing contracts have a sort of thing of this is the money if you win, this is the money if you lose kind of thing. I'm sure they haven't just written him a massive check and said whatever happens, you don't even need to fight kind of thing. It's like, just stick it in the bank, and if you fancy fighting on our channel, come and fight on our channel. It won't be like that. But and I'm sure the idea of that would have been built in. The idea that it's not been announced how much money it was for, and I'm sure the money will be different if he wins or loses to Usyk.
Just before I let you go, are you planning to go out to Saudi to cover the fight?
I am, yes. I am going out there. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing a good fight week for boxing scene. And the difficulty is getting there. And there's only one direct flight from London, and it's incredibly expensive. But I think at the moment I'm looking at flying out via Athens and coming back via Casablanca.
Nice.
So, but yeah, try and work out something without a 15-hour stopover. But or if you get a 15-hour stopover, make sure you can actually leave the airport and you're going somewhere interesting. That's the other thing. I once had a long stopover in Miami, which just could be a worse place to have a sort of 10-hour stopover. But I think it's going to be a big fight, and big fights in Vegas or Jeddah, they're always good to be around. They're always fun to watch. And, and whatever people say, people obviously knocked Joshua off in the first fight. And I've been a massive fan of Usyk since, I first saw him first time I saw him at, the first time I remember seeing him was at the European Championships in Liverpool in 2008, when Luke Campbell won gold there as well, and Lomachenko won gold, and Pulev won gold. And it always struck me at the start to make a heavyweight. Someone really nice, actually. Occasionally, you get, all the things you get on Twitter. I remember after he beat Joshua, someone dug out a tweet I did in Baku in 2011 saying Usyk could trouble all the top heavyweights. And, so I think it's going to be a tough fight for Joshua, but he knows what he's got to do. I think he approached the first fight with this idea that he's a sort of developing fighter on a journey. He's going to, he's a better boxer than he used to be, but he's got to be realistic. He went an awfully long way with a good straight jab, fast hands, and a lot of power and a big right hand. And it might make him a bit basic, but, as they used to say about Nikolai Valuev, he might be one-dimensional, but what a dimension. And Joshua has to use what he's got to try and get the result. And I think it's a fascinating fight. I don't think Joshua's, I don't think he thinks his career's over after the first one. He's not looking at it like that. I don't think it's a cash out fight. I don't think he's thinking about it like that. I think he believes he can get back and win. And I think it's an interesting. I mean, I'd edge towards Usyk, but I don't think Joshua's no hope.
Good stuff. Ron, really, really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope the drilling doesn't start all over again outside your house, as you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, it's not like it's my next door neighbours. Yeah, they're converting their living room, and yeah, they tend to start work at 8:30 in the morning when I'm having my cup of coffee. But anyway, anytime, Dan, and speak to you soon, mate.
Cheers, Ron. Take care.